Issues of inequity in education is an outgrowth of issues of inequity in our country. There's a popular show on the OWN network called The Haves and the Have-Nots. This could be the title of the educational and many public and private institutional systems in America. Rondout, an affluent neighborhood in Chicago, flush with property and business tax money, spends $28,639 a year per student for K through 12. While across town in the Ridge District, they can only spend $9,794 per child, very reminiscent of separate but equal that was struck down in Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. When I was a child, my family tried their best to shield me from the racism they grew up with. Segregation, limited opportunities, lack of mentors, lack of college graduates in the family. We were still middle class as measured by our community. My mom had fled the limitations of the small town in West Virginia to go to New York, and I stayed there with my great-grand Cat. She's the one in the white coat and the big hat on the left, and my Papa Charlie, my great uncle. My aunt was a domestic worker for an affluent white family, and my uncle was a bricklayer. I had a reference point for hard work, home ownership, and church on Sundays, but not for a professional career or CEO status. By the time I moved to New York City with my mom, she knew her daughter could not go to the local school in Harlem. They were dilapidated, subpower, and dangerous. She used everything from the address of the affluent family that she cooked for to prepping me for the IQ test to win a scholarship to a prestigious prep school. Issues of equity in education and access were heavy on her mind. So how do we pay for the schools that feed inequity in education? We live in a capitalistic society where the number one rule is follow the money. How do we pay for our schools? The balance varies from state to state, but on average it looks like this: 45% local money, 45% from the state, and 10% federal. Hence, depending on the local money and the state funding that you have, we have districts that can pay $28,639 for rich students and $9,794 for poor ones. In the face of such gross inequities in the quality of education, in San Antonio, one family, outraged at the subpar education and dilapidated building their child was subjected to, filed a lawsuit that went all the way to the Supreme Court. San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez. The Supreme Court refused to uphold equal protection under the law as it relates to the opportunity of an education on equal terms. Despite Brown versus the Board of Education, which supposedly settled the question of equal terms when they struck down separate but equal, the Supreme Court still ruled against the Rodriguez. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote in his opinion that it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied the opportunity of an education. Such an opportunity, where the state has undertaken to provide it, is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. The demand for an educated workforce in a highly digitized and interconnected world requires higher skill sets than ever. Not only are issues of inequity in education immoral and to some illegal, they are suicidal in the global marketplace. Unlike the segregated world of my parents and grandparents, our economy and world is connected and global. The U.S. continues to fall behind their international counterparts according to the most recent Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, scores in 2016. Then, U.S. Secretary John B. King Jr. said, "We're losing ground, a troubling prospect when in today's knowledge-based economy, the best jobs can go anywhere in the world." Science has settled the bias question. If you have a brain, you are biased. Couple the compost for educational and by extension institutional inequities with the manure in our own brains that instinctively associates in-group, out-group behavior, and the roots of our own demise are well fertilized. Every day we are inundated with messages of scarcity. Who is in, who is not, who is smart, who is not, who has made significant contributions to a society, and who has not. Messages that feed unconscious bias, stereotyping, and decisions that hurt individuals, organizations, and our survival as a global competitor. Decisions that feed issues of inequity. Harvard University's Project Implicit administers a free test called the INTE. The test has been taken by millions of people, and we all have bias. Bias leads to exclusion and marginalization. That same bias gets projected on who we stereotype and how we stereotype them. Neuroscience shows exclusion affecting the same areas of the brain as physical pain. Imagine the student at the school that can only afford $9,000 a year on their education, comparing themselves and their self-worth to the student in the school with the pool and the $28,000 a year being spent on their education. Consider how you feel and react when you are excluded. What is needed is disruption and a coming together. Conscious connection defeats the specter of inequality, racism, and bias. The will to effectively and compassionately educate people, no matter what their economic circumstances or physiological makeup is. The empathy and sense of justice and fairness to address issues of equity all starts with awareness and a willingness to change. Yes, we are biased and need to circumvent some of that wiring with commitment to change, practice, feedback, and learning new ways of being. In education, issues of inequity can stop people from even competing in workforce 21st century. There is so much at stake. However, just as we're wired for bias, we can change our wiring if we have the will to change, the will to embrace and to practice and create new ways of being in the world. Best-in-class organizations use measurement, executive support, structures, processes, training, supplier diversity programs, and required competencies to help foster inclusive environments, for they know when everyone is on the same team, we all win. It starts with connection. It starts with hello. Seek out and cultivate relationships with diverse people. When we get to know someone, our brains calm down. Practice empathy. If it were your child, would you want your child to receive a subpar education because of where you could afford to live? Issues of equity strike at the heart of our innate sense of justice. As an e-learning designer and consultant, it is my goal to get people talking to each other, connected to each other, problem solving together, and working together as a team and receiving a quality education and experience in the workforce.